Have you ever looked up at the night sky and wondered, why? Why are we all here? What's out there? And how does it all work? Well, you're certainly not alone. Hello everyone, and welcome to The Big Why. I'm just as curious as you are about the universe and everything in it. From the depths of the ocean to the furthest reaches of space, no question is too big, no topic too strange for us. We'll crack open the mysteries of black holes, journey to the edge of the universe, and explore the mind-blowing discoveries that are changing our world. So if you're ready to unleash your inner scientist, ask the tough questions, and explore the universe alongside me, then buckle up, and let's ask why. Time is one of the greatest mysteries our universe holds. Scientists have grappled with this question for centuries. Their theories as complex and mind-bending as time itself. We experience time every second, our lives molded by its relentless passage. Yet, its true nature remains shrouded in shadow. Is time an unyielding force of nature, a mere illusion, or perhaps a dimension yet to be fully understood? We'll delve into these perplexing questions, exploring the minds of brilliant scientists who dedicated their lives to unraveling the secrets of time. And who knows, the answer to this timeless riddle might be closer than we think. Perhaps one day, someone watching this video will be the one to change our perception of time forever. From the universe's fiery birth to this very moment, we think of time as a constant, a reliable force. We use it to measure the passage of our lives, the rise and fall of empires, the birth and death of stars. But this seemingly simple concept hides incredible depths. Think about it. What is time really? We experience it every second, yet pinning down its true nature is incredibly difficult. Time is the invisible fabric that connects past, present, and future. It's how we make sense of the ever-changing world around us. Scientists and philosophers have grappled with time for centuries. Is it like the fourth dimension, interwoven with the three dimensions of space? Or is it, as some theories suggest, warped and stretched by powerful forces like black holes? History is filled with those who have dedicated their lives to unraveling the mysteries of time. Time has long served as inspiration and motivation, from early navigators plotting their course by the stars to modern scientists seeking the very building blocks of the universe. And perhaps most importantly, our experience of time shapes our own existence. It's a constant reminder of the precious moments given to us and the importance of making the most of them. Despite its constant presence, pinning down a single perfect definition of time is surprisingly tricky. Scholars across fields have wrestled with this for ages. You see, many of our definitions fall into what's called a circular trap. We try to explain time using concepts that already depend on the idea of time. Physics, however, offers a different approach. Forget the abstract. In physics, time is defined by what it does. It's what a clock measures. Now, that might seem overly simplistic, but it holds a remarkable truth. From the ticking of a grandfather clock to the precise oscillations of atoms in an atomic clock, we've come up with ingenious ways to measure this fundamental aspect of our world. The sun's daily journey, the phases of the moon, even the precise signals from satellites orbiting Earth. These phenomena mark the relentless march of time. It's these reliable cycles that allows us to impose order on our lives and make sense of the universe around us. So, we can measure time with incredible precision, but that doesn't tell us the whole story. What is time at its most fundamental level? This question pushes physicists to the edge of their knowledge. Here's where things get fascinating and perhaps a little mind-bending. Einstein's theory of relativity throws a wrench into our understanding of time. Suddenly, time wasn't this constant, unchanging flow. Instead, it became interwoven with space, creating a single fabric called spacetime. Imagine a giant cosmic sheet where every event from a coffee mug shattering to a star exploding has its own unique location in both space and time. But according to relativity, time isn't absolute. Two observers moving at different speeds could experience time differently. For one, time might tick by normally, while for the other, it might seem to slow down. It's all relative to your perspective in the universe. This gets even more mind-boggling when we delve into the world of quantum mechanics, the science of the incredibly tiny. There, time seems to be absolute and universal, quite different from the flexible nature described by relativity. This clash of ideas is known as the problem of time. Reconciling these two theories is one of the biggest challenges facing physicists today. It's a humbling reminder that even the most fundamental aspect of our universe can hold hidden depths. Time, once thought of as simple and straightforward, is now a complex puzzle waiting to be solved. So, we have this mysterious force shaping our universe, but how do we actually measure it? Throughout history, humans have devised ingenious ways to track the passage of time. We have two main tools for this. Number one being the calendar, which you can think of as a mathematical map for organizing larger slices of time. From the cycles of the season to the precise dates of historical events, the calendar helps us make sense of long-term patterns. And then there's the clock. This is where things get down to seconds, minutes, and hours. Whether it's a simple sundial or a classic grandfather clock or the ultra-precise atomic clocks used in science, these devices measure the relentless ticks and talks of time. Nowadays, our phones and computers seamlessly blend both concepts, showing us not only the date, but the precise time down to the second. To make this work, all our timekeeping needs a starting point, a reference called an epoch. It's from the central point that we count forward and backward to determine any specific moment. The quest to measure and organize time stretches far back into the mists of human history. Let's take a look at one of our earliest tools for this task: the calendar. As far back as the Paleolithic era, some 6,000 years ago, evidence suggests that people were already using the moon's regular phases to track time. These were the first lunar calendars where a year consisted of 12 or 13 lunar months. But there was a problem. Without adjustments, a purely lunar calendar quickly falls out of sync with the seasons. This led to the development of lunisolar calendars. These clever systems would add an extra 13th month in some years, keeping the calendar roughly aligned with the solar year and changing seasons so important to agriculture. The influence of these early systems can still be seen today, where the numbers 12 and 13 hold special significance in many cultures. Across the globe, other fascinating calendars emerge. The ancient Mayans, for example, developed a system based on religious and astronomical observations. Their year had 18 months, each with 20 days and a special 5-day period at the end. These ancient calendars highlight the deep human need to understand the world around us and how the endless march of time shapes our lives. Calendars, as ingenious as they were, have always been a work in progress. Even the best solar calendars are never quite perfect. A good example of this is the Julian calendar, introduced by Julius Caesar back in 45 BC. It brought some much needed order to the Roman world, but it had a slight flaw. That seemingly tiny error allowed the dates of important events like solstices and equinoxes to drift by roughly 11 minutes every year. Jump forward to the year 1582 and we meet Pope Gregory XIII. He decided it was time for a fix, introducing the Gregorian calendar. It took centuries for this new calendar to be fully adopted across the world, but now it's the global standard that we all rely on. But the quest for the perfect calendar didn't end here. Have you ever heard of the French Republican calendar? It was developed during the French Revolution as a way to break with traditions and create a more rational system. They even reimagined the clock. 10-hour days, each with 100 minutes, each minute with 100 seconds. Unfortunately, it was perhaps a little too radical and was eventually abolished in 1806. The story of calendars is one of constant refinement of humanity's struggle to measure the passage of time with ever-increasing accuracy. Calendars are just one part of our timekeeping story. Throughout history, all sorts of clever devices have been created to track the flow of time with increasing precision. This whole field of study is called horology, and it's filled with fascinating inventions. Let's travel back to Egypt around 1500 BC. There, we'd find a curious tool resembling a bent T-square. This simple device tracked time using the shadow cast by its crossbar, an early form of a sundial. In fact, the Egyptians get credit for dividing the day into smaller parts, leading to our 12-hour system. Speaking of sundials, they became widespread tools for marking the hour with just the sun's position in the sky. But sundials have one obvious limitation. They can't show the time at night. For reliable timekeeping even in darkness, the ancient world turned to water clocks, also known as clepsydras. These were among the most accurate tools of their time. One was even found in the tomb of Pharaoh Amenhotep I. However, they needed constant attention to keep them functioning. Ancient astronomers from Greece to Mesopotamia carefully tracked time as part of their observations of the heavens. And in the Middle Ages, Arab inventors greatly improved the design of water clocks. But the real revolution in timekeeping came in 11th century China, where the first mechanical clocks powered by intricate gears and a mechanism called an escapement were developed. From flowing water to flowing sand, human ingenuity knows no bounds when it comes to timekeeping. Take the hourglass, for example. With its simple but elegant design, it became an invaluable tool for navigation. Did you know that Ferdinand Magellan relied on 18 hourglasses per ship during his historic journey around the world? In temples and churches, the passage of time was often marked by a different kind of slow burn. Incense sticks and candles. Their steady consumption provided a way to measure periods dedicated to prayer and rituals. Meanwhile, within monastery walls, water clocks and later intricate mechanical clocks helped regulate the daily rhythm of life. Figures like Richard of Wallingford in the 1300s built remarkable clockwork masterpieces that were more than just timepieces. They were miniature models of the heavens. Speaking of clockwork, we owe a great debt to scientists like Galileo Galilei and Christian Huygens. Their work with pendulums revolutionized clocks, making them far more accurate. Huygens even gets credit for adding the minute hand. And here's a bit of fun trivia. Do you know where the word clock comes from? Its origins lie around the sound of bells. Bells were used to mark time both on ships and in monasteries, and the sound they made, that clock-y or clock-a, eventually gave us the word we use today. Clocks have taken on a myriad of forms throughout history, from the humble wristwatch to the almost mythically complex clock of the long now, designed to keep time for 10,000 years. And powering these devices, we find an equally diverse range of mechanisms: the steady pull of gravity, the release of energy from coiled springs, or the precise dance of electricity. To keep them accurate, clockmakers have harnessed the reliable swing of a pendulum or the vibrations of microscopic crystals. Speaking of reliable, did you know that the first alarm clocks appeared in ancient Greece? They used water to trigger a rather noisy whistle, a clever, if startling way to start the day. Of course, the idea was later refined by inventors like Levi Hutchins or Sethi Thomas. For those navigating the vast seas, a special kind of precision was needed: the chronometer. These portable timekeepers allowed sailors to determine their longitude, revolutionizing travel and exploration. It was the brilliant work of John Harrison that finally made this possible. But if you think chronometers are impressive, wait till you hear about atomic clocks. These marvels of modern technology are accurate within seconds over millions of years. They achieved this by harnessing the incredible stable vibrations within atoms, an incredible microscopic metronome. Atomic clocks are so precise that they actually form the basis for our global timekeeping systems. In fact, our very definition of a second is now tied to the behavior of cesium atoms. In 1967, 1 second is officially defined as the time it takes for a cesium atom to complete over 9 billion cycles of a specific energy transition. And today, even the everyday task of checking the time is intertwined with incredible technology. The global positioning system, combined with clever networking, keeps clocks across the world astonishingly synchronized. Now let's talk about atomic clocks a little more. We've talked about clocks of all shapes and sizes, but none are quite as remarkable as the atomic clock. These marvels of modern science are the absolute champions of timekeeping, accurate to within seconds over millions of years. So, how did they achieve this incredible feat? Imagine an orchestra. But instead of instruments, the atomic clock uses the incredibly stable vibrations of atoms themselves. Scientists focus microwaves on cesium atoms, causing them to change energy levels in very specific ways. The atomic clock counts these vibrations, and incredibly, this tiny dance within atoms forms the basis for our modern definition of a second. One official second is equal to over 9 billion cycles of this specific atomic transition. The impact of atomic clocks go far beyond the lab. They're the silent workhorses behind our entire GPS system. Those constellations of satellites orbiting Earth rely on atomic clocks to pinpoint their location with incredible accuracy. This precise data then gets relayed down to us, allowing our phones and navigation systems to show us exactly where we are. But the quest for ever better timekeeping never stops. While cesium clocks currently reign supreme, scientists are already exploring even more precise options. Strontium clocks, for example, promise to be twice as accurate, and other designs using exotic elements like mercury hold the potential to lose or gain only a single second in a staggering 400 million years. These mind-boggling levels of precision push the boundaries of human achievement. Atomic clocks are a testament to our ingenuity and our deep desire to understand and measure the very fabric of time itself. Now let's talk units, the building blocks of time measurement. The foundation of our modern timekeeping system is the second, officially abbreviated as S. It's what those super accurate atomic clocks are counting. From there, we build up to more familiar units, starting with the minute, or min. 60 seconds make up 1 minute. Think of it as a handy little bundle of seconds. And then next is the hour, or H. This is where things get interesting. An hour is only 60 minutes, or 3,600 seconds. And then there's the day. Normally, a day has 24 hours, which works out to about 86,400 seconds. But here's where it gets a little tricky. Due to things like daylight savings time and the occasional leap second, the length of a day on the calendar can sometimes shift by a second or two. This is where that difference between astronomical time based on Earth's rotation and the precision of atomic time comes into play. Throughout history, we've looked to the heavens for answers about time. The predictable motion of stars, the rising and setting of the sun, these became our first clocks, marking the days, months, and years. We even use Earth's rotation to define the familiar 24-hour day and the 60-minute hour. But here's the problem. Nature isn't always perfectly regular. Earth's rotation actually slows down slightly over long periods due to things like tidal forces. It might only be by fractions of a second, but those tiny discrepancies matter immensely when extreme precision is needed. Imagine trying to navigate a spacecraft or keep the gears of the global internet in sync with the clock that's constantly shifting. For this, scientists turn to the microscopic world and the steady rhythms within individual atoms. That's the realm of atomic time. Instead of looking at planets or stars, atomic clocks measure the incredibly stable energy changes within specific atoms, usually cesium. When bombarded with specific frequency of energy, these atoms jump to a higher energy state, and counting those jumps lets us define a second with incredible precision. We're talking about an accuracy that would be off by a minuscule fraction of a second over millions of years. In fact, the scientific definition of a second is now based on atomic time, exactly 9,192,631,770 of these jumps within a cesium atom. Think of time standards as the rule books for measuring time. They're not just about keeping clocks in sync, but defining exactly what we mean by a second, or pinpointing a specific date. Things used to be a lot simpler, with timekeeping tied to the rotation of Earth and the movement of the stars. But then came the incredibly precise atomic clocks in the 1950s, and everything changed. Nowadays, we have a whole hierarchy of time standards, each suited for different purposes. First, we have International Atomic Time, or TAI. This is ground zero for modern timekeeping. It's purely atomic time scale, based entirely on the ticking of those super accurate atomic clocks. Next, we have Universal Time, or UT1. This is the older astronomical way of determining time based on Earth's rotation. Unfortunately, our planet isn't a perfect timekeeper, so UT1 can drift slightly compared to TAI. And then next we have Coordinated Universal Time, or UTC. Think of UTC as the bridge between the atomic world and the astronomical world. It's based on atomic time, but it's adjusted with leap seconds to stay roughly in line with Earth's rotation. This way, the sun still generally rises and sets at the times we expect. Then next, we have the Global Positioning System, or GPS. This vital system transmits signals that include a very precise time based on UTC. And that's not all. To make things even more interesting, we divide the globe into time zones. Each zone keeps a standard time that's usually a whole hour offset from UTC. This is why it's an hour later in New York than in Los Angeles. And because of daylight savings time, in many places these offsets even change throughout the year. Finally, scientists use even more specialized time standards tailored for specific areas like astronomy, or those that take the intricacies of general relativity into account. Throughout history, the question of how does time work hasn't just been for scientists. Philosophers and theologians have grappled with this concept as well, influencing our entire understanding of life and the universe. Many ancient cultures, from the Incans and the Mayans to the Babylonians and ancient Greeks, embraced a cyclical view of time, often picturing it as a great wheel. Within this concept, history doesn't move in a straight line, but rather through reoccurring ages. This idea is deeply woven into religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. This cyclical understanding of time has profound impact on how we view our own lives. It suggests a pattern of birth, growth, decline, and ultimately renewal. The idea that the universe itself undergoes these cycles can provide both comfort and a sense of deep connection to the cosmos. This stands in contrast to the linear view of time that became more dominant in Western thought, where time is seen as an arrow moving ever forward from a fixed creation towards an ultimate end. Each worldview holds its own implications for how we live our lives and understand our place in the grand scheme of things. The lens through which we view time is deeply influenced by our religious and cultural backgrounds. In the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, time is largely understood as linear. Rather than a repeating cycle, it's seen as a path with a distinct beginning and an ultimate end. This idea has its roots in the concept of creation, a singular divine act that brought the universe and time itself into existence. From this initial moment, time flows purposefully forward. It's a canvas upon which humanity history unfolds, guided by divine will. In the Christian tradition, this linear view culminates in the idea of an end time, an eschatological event marking the conclusion of the present order. This perspective casts time as both precious and finite, emphasizing the significance of each individual's choices and actions within their allotted lifespan. The Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes reflects on this concept. While the text predates a fully developed linear understanding of time, it explores the idea of events unfolding within a framework of defined seasons and moments. There's a sense of destiny at play in this perspective, hinting at the later development of the linear view with Abrahamic faiths. The ancient Greeks had a profound understanding of multiple facets of time. Their language even distinguished between two distinct concepts, Chronos and Kairos. Chronos, often personified as the god Kronos, embodies the familiar concept of time we use today. Sequential, measurable, and ever marching onward. He's the time of the clock and the calendar, the type of time we track and plan our lives around. Think of him as Father Time, with his long beard and relentless march. But then there's Kairos, a deeper, more elusive concept of time. Kairos is the opportune moment, the fleeting instant when everything aligns perfectly. It's the time of divine intervention, of unexpected opportunity, of a sudden shift in destiny. In a sense, Kairos transcends the mundane constraints of Chronos. The interplay between Chronos and Kairos shapes so many Greek myths. We see it in the heroic tales of seizing the right moment in battle, and also in tragic stories of missed opportunities and actions taken at the wrong time. This rich understanding reminds us that time isn't just a number ticking away. It's a complex tapestry of the ordinary and extraordinary, of the predictable and those moments when the very fabric of fate seem to ripple and change. Within the realm of Jewish thought, time takes on an even more enigmatic and paradoxical nature. Some rabbinical teachings suggest a view of time as fluid and malleable, not unlike an accordion expanding and contracting. This challenges our usual conception of time as a rigid, unchanging progression. Kabbalah, the Jewish mystical tradition, takes this even further by asserting that our everyday perception of time is a grand illusion. Kabbalists see time as a construct of our own limited understanding, while true reality exists beyond the confines of linear time. This has profound implications for how we approach concepts like free will and the divine. If time is not as fixed as we perceive it, perhaps our actions have far greater potential to shape our own destiny and impact the world around us than we first imagined. It's also intriguing to consider how this perspective might reconcile with the physical understanding of space-time in modern physics, where time is shown to be relative and somewhat flexible. Western philosophy is a battleground of ideas about the very nature of time. On one side, we have the realist view, championed by figures like Isaac Newton. This perspective sees time as an independent dimension, a kind of stage upon which the universe plays out. Events happen within time, but time itself marches on regardless. Opposing this is the view held by philosophers such as Leibniz and Immanuel Kant. They argue that time isn't a tangible thing out there in the universe, but rather an intellectual construct, a way for our minds to make sense of the world. They argue time doesn't flow. It's how we organize events and relations to each other. This debate delves into intriguing questions. Is there an objective time out there, or is our experience of time partly subjective? Can time be measured in isolation, or can we only quantify it in relation to change and movement? The roots of this discussion stretch back to the ancient world. Greek philosophers pondered whether time was a linear progression or a cycle, whether it was finite or infinite. Indian thinkers explored the concept of cyclical time, mirroring the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. Plato believed time was a creation of a divine being, brought into existence along with the universe itself. Aristotle, on the other hand, linked time inextricably with motion and change. He saw time as a measurement of how the world around us transforms. The quest to understand time echoes through millennia of human thought. From the ancient Vedas of India, with their grand cycles of creation and destruction, to the mind-bending musings of St. Augustine, philosophers have grappled with this elusive concept. Greek thinkers like Parmenides and Heraclitus offered contrasting views that continue to resonate today. Parmenides saw time as an illusion, while Heraclitus emphasized the ever-changing nature of reality. This debate raged for centuries, culminating in a great clash of ideas between Isaac Newton and Gottfried Leibniz. Newton championed the concept of absolute time, an unchanging foundation of the universe. Leibniz argued that time was relational. It only takes on meaning in the context of objects and their motion. But perhaps the most intriguing insights come from those who question the very reality of time. St. Augustine famously grappled with its nature, asking, "If no one asks me, I know. But if someone asks, I know not, he ultimately views time as an internal stretching of the mind, connecting our experience of past, present, and future. Immanuel Kant brought in yet another perspective. He argued that time, like space, is a fundamental part of how the human mind structures the world. We don't perceive time as it truly is, but only through the lens of our own consciousness. This tapestry of thought highlights the extraordinary depths hidden within such a simple question. What is time? There's the cyclical time of Eastern traditions, the clash between absolute and relative time, and the questioning of time's very reality. Immanuel Kant's revolutionary ideas about time shook the foundations of philosophy. He rejected the idea of time as an external force or a river that carries us along. Instead, he argued that time is an essential part of our own mental toolkit, a way for our minds to make sense of the world. It's one of the fundamental lenses through which we perceive order within the chaos of sensations. Kant believed that neither time nor space are tangible things that exist out there in the universe. Rather, they are part of the framework of our minds, a system we use to organize events, measure distances, and understand the movement of objects. His ideas have been immensely influential, shaping how we think about the nature of reality itself. However, at the turn of the 20th century, the philosopher Henry Bergson challenged this view. He rejected the idea of time as a neat, measurable structure imposed by our minds. Instead, he introduced the concept of duration. To Bergson, true time, duration, was something fluid, creative, and deeply intertwined with our individual experiences and memories. This fundamental disagreement highlights a key question. Is our experience of time primarily a product of our own minds, organizing our perceptions as Kant argued, or is time a raw ingredient of reality as Bergson believed, an expression of the ever-changing creative forces of the universe? Martin Heidegger boldly challenges our usual conception of time. Most of us imagine ourselves moving through time as though it were an external landscape, but Heidegger suggests we turn this notion on its head. We don't exist within time, we are time. By this, he means our very sense of being is inseparable from our awareness of past, present, and future. Our memory of what has been and our anticipation of what might be shape the present moment and our experience of life. For Heidegger, this breaks down the rigid linearity of time. Our consciousness can fluidly access different points in our personal timeline, a concept he calls ecstasis. Fast forward to the modern era, and philosophers continue this intense debate. Is time fundamental or a construct of our minds? Does the past, present, and future all exist simultaneously, or is there a continuous flow from one to the next? The tenseless or B theory of time offers a mind-bending perspective. It suggests we can replace phrases like will happen or has happened with tenseless variations. The future, they argue, is as fixed as the past, just not experienced by us. Opposing this is the tense or A theory of time. This view maintains that the flow of time is real, the future open-ended, and fundamentally different from the past. Our verb tenses exist for a reason, they assert, because there's an inherent dynamism to time itself. Perhaps the most perplexing concept is imaginary time, made famous by Stephen Hawking. It proposes an alternative dimension of time orthogonal to our usual experience. Finite yet boundless. It's a concept that pushes the boundaries of our imagination. While there's no easy answer, one thing philosophers do seem to agree on is a distinction. Physical time appears to be an objective feature of our universe, while psychological time, how we individually experience the passage of time, is deeply subjective and influenced by our own minds. Is time as we experience it a mere fabrication of our minds, or a fundamental pillar of the universe? This question has plagued thinkers for millennia. As far back as ancient Greece, philosophers like Antiphon and Sophist proposed that time was not a concrete thing, but merely a concept we use to measure and make sense of the world. Parmenides took it a step further, declaring time, motion, and change to be nothing but grand illusions, a radical stance echoed in some Buddhist philosophy. Jumping to the 20th century, J.M.E. McTaggart stoked the debate with his famous paper, The Unreality of Time. He argued that since events constantly shift from being future to present to past, the very idea of time becomes logically inconsistent and contradictory. However, many modern physicists hold a different view. Inspired by Einstein's relativity, they see time as interwoven with space, forming the very fabric of our universe. Some, like Julian Barbauer, even suggest that time as we know it disappears at the most fundamental level of reality, and only motions create our illusion of flow. Another intriguing perspective of that is presentism. Presentists believe only the present moment truly exists. The past is merely a memory trace, the future just potential. This view has strong implications. It essentially casts time travel as fundamentally impossible. Opposing presentism is eternalism, which asserts that past, present, and future are all equally real, just at different locations along the timeline. Then there's the growing block theory, a sort of hybrid where the past and present are fixed, but the future remains an open canvas. For centuries, our understanding of time was shaped by the ideas of Isaac Newton. He envisioned time as an unyielding force, like an arrow soaring through space. Every second was identical, everywhere in the universe. This idea of absolute, unchanging time provided a solid foundation for classical physics and our everyday experience. But then came Albert Einstein in 1905, and his special theory of relativity shattered our notions of time. He made a radical claim. The speed of light in a vacuum is constant for all observers, regardless of their own motion. This seemingly simple principle had profound consequences. Einstein showed that if the speed of light must stay the same, then time itself must be relative. Time is not an absolute stage where events play out, but rather a dimension interwoven with space, creating something called spacetime. Observers moving at different speeds would experience time passing at different rates. Time could literally speed up or slow down depending on how fast you are moving and the influence of gravity. To visualize this, imagine time not as an arrow, but as a river. It flows at different speeds depending on the terrain, warping around massive objects and even slowing down near strong gravitational forces. This means that time experience on Earth isn't identical to the time experience on a fast-moving spaceship or near a black hole. The work of physicists like J.C. Half and Richard Keating dramatically confirmed Einstein's ideas. By flying atomic clocks around the world, they demonstrated the real-world effects of time dilation. Clocks traveling eastward in the direction of Earth's rotation tick slower, while those going westward tick slightly faster, direct evidence of time's flexibility. Time has a peculiar quality unlike anything else we know. Unlike the dimensions of space, where we move freely back and forth, time only seems to flow relentlessly in one direction, from past to future. We remember yesterday, but not tomorrow. The past seems fixed, the future open-ended. This directional flow is called the arrow of time. But here's the mystery. Many of the fundamental laws of physics are time symmetric. If you reverse the direction of time, they would still work perfectly. A ball bouncing, for instance, looks just as plausible whether you play the video forward or backward. So why then does time itself seem so stubbornly one-directional? Physicists have identified several potential arrows of time operating in our universe. Number one being the radiative arrow. Light waves spread outwards in expanding circles, never the reverse. This hints at a link between energy dispersal and time's forward march. The next is the entropic arrow. The second law of thermodynamics states that disorder, or entropy, tends to increase in isolated systems. Imagine an egg shattering on the floor. The reverse, pieces spontaneously assembling back into a whole egg, is so improbable that we never observe it. And then there's the quantum arrow. The very act of measurement in quantum mechanics seems to introduce a time asymmetry. This collapse of potentiality into a definite state is thought by some to be irreversible. And then there's the weak arrow. Certain subatomic interactions involving the weak force exhibit an ever so slight preference for one direction of time. This phenomenon is still poorly understood, but tantalizing. And then finally, we have the cosmological arrow. The universe itself is expanding, driven by a force we don't fully understand. This irreversible expansion provides perhaps the most obvious arrow of time. The big question is, are all of these arrows related to a single fundamental principle that dictates time's flow? Or are there multiple contributing factors at play? The debate rages on, and it touches on deep questions of causality, randomness, and the very nature of the universe we inhabit. For a long time, Newton's approach to time seemed perfectly sufficient. Clocks ticked along reliably, and his laws of motion allowed for precise predictions. Time appeared as a bedrock upon which to build our understanding of the physical world. However, as the 19th century progressed, cracks started appearing in this neat picture. Physicists studying electricity and magnetism encountered strange behavior that couldn't be fully explained with the established notion of time. The behavior of light, in particular, became a thorny issue. Enter Einstein once again. To resolve these discrepancies, he offered a radical solution: synchronizing clocks not with an abstract notion of absolute time, but using the constant speed of light itself. If light travels at the same speed for all observers, regardless of their own motion, then time could no longer be seen as a universal, unchanging background. What Einstein demonstrated is mind-bending. If you and I are moving at different speeds, we would literally measure a different amount of time passing between the same two events. This was a fundamental break from the comforting world of Newton, where all clocks in the universe ran in lockstep. Einstein's theories of relativity forever shattered our understanding of time. Gone was the idea of time as a separate universal stage. Instead, he revealed time and space as inextricably linked, forming a four-dimensional fabric called spacetime. Think of spacetime like a giant trampoline. Observers in different locations or moving at different speeds are standing on different parts of this trampoline. Each observer's perspective is shaped by how their motion and local gravity warp the fabric around them. Now, imagine a spaceship hurtling through space at near light speed. To its crew, time seems to flow normally. Their clocks tick, they age, and everything feels the way it should. However, a stationary observer watching the spaceship fly by would see something extraordinary. The spaceship would appear distorted, flattened in its direction of travel, and all the clocks on board, including the biological clocks of the crew, would seem to be ticking incredibly slowly. But it's not just a one-way street. To the spaceship crew, it would be the stationary observer who appears slowed down and distorted. Both perspectives are equally valid, a consequence of their relative motion within the pliable spacetime fabric. This even influences how we see cause and effect. Imagine the crew beams a light signal back to the stationary observer. For them, it travels an immense distance across the cosmos. However, from the spaceship's perspective, that vast distance is compressed, making the journey seem far shorter. This is because their rapid motion through space is also motion through time, warping the very shape of the path that light takes. The key takeaway? Time itself bends in response to gravity and motion. What seems like a short interval to one observer can be a vast stretch to another. The simple rules of past, present, and future start to blur, making way for a much more complex and fascinating view of how the universe operates. And all of this is called time dilation, and it's one of the most startling consequences of Einstein's relativity. And this effect has been dramatically confirmed in experiments with subatomic particles. These tiny bits of matter have a well-defined lifespan. When zipping around in a particle accelerator at incredible speeds, these particles live much longer from our perspective than they would if they were at rest. From their perspective, it's the distances they travel that shorten. Einstein also revolutionized our concept of simultaneity. Picture two lightning strikes hitting opposite ends of a speeding train. For someone standing on the ground at the midpoint, the flashes of light from each strike would arrive at the same time, meaning those events were simultaneous. But for someone riding in the train, the light from the flash in front would arrive before the light from the flash in the rear. Simultaneity, it turns out, depends on your frame of reference. The key to understanding the revolutionary change brought about relativity lies in contrasting two fundamental transformations: the Galilean transformation of Newtonian physics and the Lorentz transformation at the heart of Einstein's theory. Traditional physics assumes time is absolute. Imagine a graph where the vertical axis is time and the horizontal axis is distance. A stationary observer's world line is vertical, time ticks on, but they don't move in space. If this observer starts moving, their line tilts, reflecting their new velocity. However, the crucial part is that all horizontal slices of this graph, representing the now for different observers, remain perfectly horizontal. Everyone's now aligns. Einstein blew this apart. He showed the speed of light is constant for everyone. On our graph, this means light beams follow 45-degree angle lines. These form a light cone. Anything within it is potentially connected to the observer by cause-effect. Here's the twist. When an observer accelerates their axis warp, the horizontal now line tilts upwards towards the future light cone. Events an observer previously thought were simultaneous now shift in time, some further in the past, some in the future. Simultaneity collapses. What's now for one person isn't for someone else. While we often think of time as smooth and continuous, some theoretical models suggest there might be a fundamental limit to how finely we can divide it. This is the concept of time quantization. Imagine time not as a smooth line, but as a series of tiny, indivisible ticks, much like individual pixels make up a digital image. The Planck time, an incredibly tiny fraction of a second, about 5.4 times 10 to the negative 44th seconds, emerges in theories as a possible candidate for the smallest possible chunk of time. Why does this matter? Our current best theories of physics, like the Standard Model and general relativity, break down at extremely small scales like those near the Planck time. Some physicists believe that this breakdown points to a new, deeper theory of physics where both space-time and time itself become quantized. One such area where this might be relevant is loop quantum gravity. In this model, space-time itself is envisioned as a network of tiny interconnected loops. Time quantization could be a natural consequence of this loopy structure. However, it's important to stress that time quantization remains a speculative concept. As of now, there's no direct experimental evidence to confirm whether or not time truly has a minimum indivisible unit. The second law of thermodynamics is a cornerstone of physics. It states that entropy, a measure of disorder in a system, always tends to increase over time. Think of a cup shattering or smoke dispersing. It's essentially impossible for these processes to run in reverse. This gives rise to the entropy arrow of time. Now, here's where things get fascinating. While entropy gives us an arrow of time, many of the underlying laws of physics don't care about time's direction. A ball bouncing looks perfectly plausible whether you play the video forward or backward. So, why is our universe a place where eggs break but never unbreak, where ice melts but never spontaneously forms in a warm drink? Some physicists, like Brian Greene, propose this as a statistical fluke. Maybe most directions of time are high in entropy, and our universe, with its ordered past and increasing entropy, is simply an uncommon situation, like getting 10 heads in a row when flipping coins. However, there's a catch. This idea of time-symmetric entropy doesn't quite match our everyday experience. We don't see isolated systems suddenly decreasing in entropy. The asymmetry of time seems far more stubborn than simple statistics would imply. This leads to two major possibilities. Number one, our current understanding of entropy is incomplete. There might be some hidden factor that makes an increase in entropy far more likely than a decrease, ensuring the arrow of time we observe. Or number two, time's arrow is tied to an even deeper principle. Perhaps it's rooted in the expansion of the universe itself, forcing order to decay, but leaving us with many unanswered questions. The idea of time travel has captivated the human imagination for centuries. Stories of adventurers leaping through time, altering history, or witnessing the future hold immense appeal. But is any of this remotely possible? Sadly, the laws of physics as we understand them pose serious challenges. One major obstacle is causality. Imagine traveling back in time and preventing your own grandparents from meeting. You wouldn't exist to travel back in time in the first place. This is the classic grandfather paradox, a logical tangle arising from time travel that violates cause and effect. There are a few potential ways to address this. Number one being the parallel universes. Perhaps when meddling with the past, you simply create a new timeline, leaving your own origin untouched. This aligns with some interpretations of quantum mechanics. Or number two, the Novikov self-consistency principle. This idea argues you can't truly change the past. Any attempt to do so would create events that conspire to ensure the original timeline happened anyway. It's as if the universe protects its own history. Of course, even ignoring paradoxes, the practical aspects of time travel are incredibly daunting. General relativity hints that manipulating space-time to create paths through time would require vast amounts of energy and perhaps exotic forms of matter we don't fully understand. Despite the difficulties, time travel remains a compelling what if. It forces us to examine the very nature of free will, the relationship between cause and effect, and whether or not the future is truly unwritten. For centuries, scientists envisioned the cosmos as a three-dimensional stage where the drama of the universe played out. Time was a separate force, marking the passage of events. But then came Einstein, and his revolutionary idea shattered this picture forever. Einstein realized that time couldn't be divorced from space. He proposed that the two are interwoven, forming a four-dimensional fabric called spacetime. This wasn't just abstract mathematics. He asserted that this space-time fabric warps and bends in response to matter and energy. Massive objects, stars, planets, even you and I, create dents in space-time, altering the paths of objects and even the flow of time itself. It sounded far-fetched, But Einstein's general theory of relativity predicted some startling consequences. One was the phenomenon known as frame dragging. Imagine Earth spinning in the vastness of space. According to Einstein, it shouldn't just tug on objects with gravity, but actually twist the surrounding space-time ever so slightly. For years, this remained just a theory, but science marches on. And NASA's Gravity Probe B was designed to test this bizarre idea. It carried 4 incredibly precise gyroscopes into orbit. If Einstein was wrong, these gyroscopes would stay perfectly aligned towards a distant star. If he was right, Earth's rotation would subtly but unmistakably drag them off course. The results were stunning. They did drift. Space-time around our spinning planet was indeed contorted. This extraordinary experiment offered direct evidence that space isn't just a backdrop. It's a dynamic player interlocked with time itself, and gravity is the tool that molds it. We've explored time as the enigmatic fourth dimension, woven into the fabric of space-time alongside space. Einstein's theories revealed a universe far stranger than we could have imagined. A universe where gravity bends space and time, and the flow of time itself can be stretched or slowed. But what if the strangeness goes even further? Imagine if not just space, but time itself could curve back on itself in a grand loop. Just as some theories propose that traveling forever in a straight line through space could bring you back to your starting point, could time be cyclical as well? Ancient cultures around the world held beliefs in cyclical time, where epochs of creation and destruction followed each other in an endless loop. Science fiction explores similar concepts, with characters traveling through time only to find themselves back where they began, their journeys creating paradoxes or fulfilling inevitable destinies. While there's no scientific evidence to support a closed time loop, the idea is intriguing. Perhaps the universe itself has a cyclical nature, expanding and contracting in a cosmic heartbeat, with time echoing this immense rhythm. This concept ties back beautifully to the curvature of space-time. Einstein's general relativity suggests that massive objects warp space-time. On a grand enough scale, could the mass and energy of the entire universe cause space-time to curve back on itself, creating a closed loop in both space and time? We don't have the answers yet, but this is the beauty of science. It allows us to explore these mind-bending ideas, pushing the boundaries of our knowledge and forcing us to question our assumptions about the cosmos. Our experience of time doesn't always align neatly with clockwork precision. Psychologists and philosophers have long studied a phenomenon known as the specious present. This refers to the fact that our sense of now isn't a razor-thin instant, but a short interval, a kind of moving window through which we perceive the world. E.R. Clay first coined this term, and William James explored it further. He believed our minds hold on to a fading echo of what just happened, blending it with the current sensory input. This gives us the feeling of the present moment as a continuous flow, even though it technically consists of a series of mini snapshots. Think about listening to a melody. Each individual note exists only briefly, yet our minds link them together, creating the experience of the piece as a whole. In a similar way, our perception of time smooths out these discrete micro moments into seemingly unbroken flow. The exact length of the specious present is still debated. Some experiments suggest it might last a few seconds, potentially influenced by the type of sensory information we're processing. This adds a fascinating layer of complexity to how we experience the passage of time. Time isn't just a concept out there in the universe. Our very bodies and brains are intricately involved in how we perceive and experience its passage. Amazingly, there's no single timekeeping center in the brain. Research shows that time perception is a complex process involving multiple regions, including the cerebral cortex, cerebellum, and basal ganglia. One fascinating area is the superchiasmatic nuclei, a tiny bundle of cells that governs our circadian rhythm, our body's 24-hour biological clock. This internal clock influences our sleep-wake cycles, hormone release, and even body temperature fluctuations. Beyond that, our experience of time can be profoundly influenced by chemicals within our own bodies. Stimulants, for example, can increase the release of neurotransmitters like dopamine. This can excite neurons, making them fire more rapidly, potentially leading to an overestimation of how much time has passed. Depressants, on the other hand, can dampen neural activity, leading to the opposite effect, a feeling that time is dragging by. A specialized field called mental chronometry goes even further. By carefully measuring reaction times in response to specific tasks, researchers can glean insights into the speed of mental processing and how our brains sequence information over time. This sheds light on a profound idea. How we experience the flow of time isn't just about external clocks, but it's deeply intertwined with the inner workings of our own biology and minds. Even the seemingly simple concept of time must be learned and understood over the course of our lives. As young children, our understanding of time is very limited. Infants and toddlers live almost entirely in the immediate present, guided by simple cues like hunger and tiredness. Their world is a whirlwind of now and not now. It's around the ages of 5 and 6 that children start grasping the broader concepts of past, present, and future. They begin to make sense of experiences that have already happened and anticipate those still to come. This is a crucial developmental milestone, helping children organize their memories, plan simple actions, and understand stories. As children enter elementary school between the ages of 7 and 10, their grasp of time becomes even more sophisticated. They learn to tell time using clocks, read calendars, and understand concepts like days of the week. With this, they gain a deeper ability to structure their lives and understand the rhythms of daily and weekly routines. This developmental journey reminds us that time isn't a singular, universal experience. How we interpret the passage of moments is shaped by our cognitive development. It's an ability we gradually build within ourselves along with countless other skills that help us navigate the world. While clocks and calendars offer us an objective way to measure time, our personal experience of it can be surprisingly malleable. Various factors can warp our perceptions, making hours seem to fly by or minutes to stretch out uncomfortably. Psychoactive drugs, as we discussed, have a profound effect on our neurochemistry, potentially speeding up or slowing down our internal clock. But it's not just chemicals that can distort time. Optical illusions, known as temporal illusions, can trick our brains into misjudging the duration of events. The Kappa effect is a great example. Imagine seeing two flashes of light in different locations. It can skew our perception of how much time passed between them. Age also plays a role. Many people have the sensation that time seems to speed up as they get older. While the reasons behind this are still debated, one theory ties it to changes in neurotransmitter levels. Younger brains with a greater abundance of excitatory neurotransmitters might be better equipped to handle the rapid fire of information, giving them the illusion of time unfolding more slowly. Furthermore, neurological conditions like Parkinson's disease and attention deficit disorder can significantly impair an individual's sense of time. This highlights the delicate interplay between our mental state and our ability to accurately track the world around us. We tend to think of time as something intangible, an invisible force flowing around us. However, cutting-edge research suggests our brains fundamentally understand time through the lens of space. It's as if we have an internal mental timeline, where we arrange past, present, and future. Incredibly, the shape and direction of this mental timeline are influenced by culture and experience. Western cultures, with their left-to-right reading and writing, often envision time flowing from left, which is the past, to right, the future. But for cultures with right-to-left writing systems, the timeline can be reversed. This gets even more intriguing when we look beyond our everyday experience. The Yupno people of Papua New Guinea link their sense of time to the landscape. Their river flows downhill towards the ocean, so the past is downhill for them and the future is uphill towards the source. The Pormpuaus, an Australian Aboriginal group, arrange time according to cardinal directions. For them, photographs of a man aging would be placed east to west, with the youngest version of the man in the east. These remarkable examples show that there's no single, universal way that humans conceptualize time. It's shaped by language, environment, and the deepest aspects of how we perceive our world. This suggests other abstract concepts like causality or even numbers could be also mentally organized in dramatically different ways across different cultures. Time isn't just about clocks and calendars. It's a powerful force woven into the fabric of our societies and impacting our personal lives. Sociologists and anthropologists study a concept called time discipline. This encompasses the rules, both spoken and unspoken, that govern how we measure, value, and utilize time. Think about it. Working hours, school schedules, the emphasis on punctuality and deadlines, these reflect our society's shared and sometimes stressful understandings of time. Sociologists like Arlie Russell and Norbert Elias have explored the connections between time, power dynamics, and economic systems. Time use has a huge practical impact. It's a key factor studied in fields like urban planning, transportation, and education. Researchers analyze how people divide their time between activities, work, leisure, commuting, and even sleep. While technology alters how we live, some patterns remain remarkably stable, like the average amount of time we're willing to spend commuting. On a personal level, time management is a skill many of us strive to master. Calendars, planners, and productivity apps all aim to help us estimate task lengths, prioritize, and hopefully stay on top of our busy lives. The way we manage our time reflects our individual values and goals. A key way we make sense of the world is by understanding sequences of events, or the order in which things happen. From grand historical narratives to the simple steps of a recipe. Knowing what came before and what happened after is crucial. This concept of cause and effect is deeply embedded in how we reason. When events are strung together in a sequence, we look for causal relationships. why something happened, and what consequences it had. This ability lets us analyze the past, predict possible futures, and create detailed plans. Sequences of events take many forms. For one, stories in history. Narratives, both real and fictional, rely on sequences to give them structure and meaning. What happened earlier in a story shapes our understanding of later events. Number two is procedures and instructions. Think about building furniture or following a recipe. Detailed steps in the correct order are essential for success. And then we also have science and technology. Understanding natural processes often involves breaking them down into sequences, the stages of a chemical reaction, the development of an embryo, or the steps that lead to a technological malfunction. Specific tools help us visualize and track sequences of events. Timelines offer a clear visual representation, while fields like law, finance, and engineering use specialized methods to analyze sequences and pinpoint critical moments for investigation or intervention. Understanding how events unfold over time isn't just about the past, it's also about planning for the future and making informed decisions about the best course of action. We've explored space-time, the subtleties of perception, and the ways time and culture intertwine. But the mysteries of time aren't reserved only for scientists in white lab coats. The very act of pondering time, of questioning your own experience of it, makes you a participant in the grand quest for understanding. Remember, groundbreaking ideas have come from the most unexpected places. Perhaps the next major breakthrough about the true nature of time will come from someone with a fresh perspective, someone who dares to ask new questions. Could that someone be you? Don't be afraid to observe, to wonder, to imagine. The history of science is filled with ordinary people driven by extraordinary curiosity, people who changed our understanding of the universe. The secrets of time are out there, woven into the fabric of reality, waiting to be discovered. Go forth, explore, and keep pondering the question, what is time? You might be amazed by what answers you find. Thank you everyone for watching. My name's The Big Why. Don't forget to drop a like, and if you're new to the Why Not family, a follow. And I'll catch you guys in the next video.